Hello, everyone. Today I have brought you a very special guest. His name is David Miner, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell you exactly what he solves and who he's here to help. He also happens to be my brother. So if you notice, we kind of look the same. That's why. And we're both out here helping people have better relationships. So this is a great opportunity, and I'm very honored to be hearing about his practice and sharing this news with the world. So, David, how are you doing? And tell us, what problem do you solve and who do you solve it for?
So I'm a counselor and I work with people from different walks of life. But one thing that I'm particularly passionate about is helping Christian men with porn addiction because that's something that I struggled with as a young man growing up in the church, and there wasn't a lot of resources. They didn't talk about it a lot. Um, and so I think that's something that is lacking. But then when I became a counselor, I realized that the church's approach to dealing with things, doesn't understand a lot of the psychological aspect of it. But then with the psychological aspect and the counseling, especially for Christian men, it doesn't really teach them how to integrate their faith into that and use it as a resource to overcome that addiction. And so that's my passion is helping men, struggling with this through community, through their faith, and through, real principles based on psychology that work, overcome this for the long term and not just falling back into relapse again and again. Because, I think it affects a lot of people. It affects marriages, it affects families, individuals, obviously. And then there's the whole supply side and the sex industry and exploitation. So it's a huge issue. Most people watch porn in society. In the church, around half of men and even a growing number of women do. So it's a massive topic that we aren't really addressing or talking about, and that's what I want to help with.
That's awesome. I love that you're talking about this issue that people don't really know what to do with. And I think one of the questions that comes up a lot is like, well, what's the difference between like looking at porn and a porn addiction? Because, like you said, so many people are looking at it. It's everywhere on the internet. It's nearly impossible for young men to avoid. Um, how would you define the difference between normative use, addictive use? What's your spectrum? How do you define those things?
So that's an interesting question because people who are critical of the concept of porn addiction will say that it's not technically a thing. They'll say that porn addiction highly correlates with Christian faith, so that it's more just it's not a problem. It's only a problem if you think it's a problem, right? And so it's true. The porn addiction isn't in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's used by North American mental health therapists for diagnosing and treating disorders. However, if we go off the, definition of an addiction as something that, a compulsive behavior that you engage in that causes harm to your, major areas of your life, like work, your relationships, and your mental health, then I think it would qualify. Because the difference between an addiction and just normative use is that it's causing serious impact on your life. So I think that's the big reason why it's correlated with Christian faith. Because if your wife, for example, doesn't care that you look at porn, and your porn use isn't causing you any major problems, like it's not causing you erectile dysfunction, it's not causing you problems at work, then according to, the psychological definition of an addiction, it's not a problem, right? But if you're a Christian man, or if you're just a man whose wife doesn't want you to look at porn, then that could cause you to get a divorce, and that's a big problem, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's why it's a bit tricky, is because it's defined by impact on your life, and the impact that it has on your life will also be somewhat dependent on how you view it and how the people around you view it.
That's fascinating to me. I didn't know it wasn't classified on the DSM because I thought like sex addiction was there and that might be like under it. Just being
So
in the
the
relation.
only so
Go ahead.
so to clarify, the only addiction definition that's in the DSM that's not drug addiction, so a behavioral addiction, the only one that's technically in there is gambling addiction. There's
Oh,
no
that's very
gaming addiction, there's no
interesting.
sexual addiction, there's no any other behavioral addiction, shopping addiction, technically.
Interesting that gambling got in there, probably because it's been around for a long time and we have time to get it in there.
And
The
it
next,
causes severe damage, right? Like
yes,
financial ruin, right?
right,
So,
right. You keep
yeah.
putting your house on the craps table and then you don't have a home anymore. It's so interesting to hear that it's like people are dismissing this because as a woman who's helping women in their marriages, who's seeing, how can women transform their marriages, but also what are the main struggles and pain points women have? Porn is huge. women are
Hmm.
not okay with their husband looking at a lot of porn. Now, some women will say, like, you know what, I don't want to know if it's a little bit like whatever, right? Like,
Hmm.
we know this probably happens, we just don't want to think about it. But we don't even like thinking about it. Like, it does usually bother the woman. Some women will say, no, no, it's cool, I do it
Yeah.
too. But I would say that for the most women, it really brings up a lot of insecurity. Like, why does he need to look at this woman? They don't look like I look at all, and this is turning him on. How am I going to turn him on? Or like, even he's choosing to look at porn over being intimate with me, which will, be really, really threatening and hurtful to
Hmm.
women. So it's like, from just an experiential perspective in the field, porn addiction's a big deal. And I've seen it cause all kinds of side effects, but I'd love to hear from you. What are the main side effects when this becomes something that's really impacting your life?
So, with addiction, generally any addiction, there's desensitization and sensitization. So, sensitization is when you engage in something in an addictive way, right? The best addiction definition that I've heard is ritualized comfort seeking. So, you're stressed, you're bored, you're anxious, and so you seek comfort in something, right? Whether that be a vape or marijuana or porn or porn. And so, when you engage in this way, you become sensitized to that stimuli, right? So the impact is that you are now you get more pleasure and more activation out of pornographic images or stimuli, right? So someone who has had a history of porn addiction, if they see anything even remotely sexual in a movie or, anyone who's like remotely dressed in a provocative way, their reward system is going to be lighting up like crazy. Whereas the person who's not addicted to porn would just be a regular man who's interested in that and desires that, but is not. It's not like this, fireworks going on in his reward system. So that's one aspect. And then the desensitization is that after prolonged use and repeated use, you build up tolerance, right? So if you're an alcoholic, you can drink, insane amounts of alcohol and it doesn't, meet your needs anymore. And so that's the same with porn use. And that's why it typically results in people searching out more, novel and sort of fetishistic material because the regular stuff doesn't do it anymore. And that's where it can lead to acting out, right? Because, it's porn's not doing it anymore for you anymore. So then you go into like a live chat and then you might seek out prostitution or things like that. And so the impact that it has on your brain is that it wires it to look for that kind of stimuli more because of the sensitization, but then it drives more intense behaviors if unchecked because of the tolerance that builds up.
That's so clear. I like that you can see how it's becoming a bigger deal in your life. It's now the thing
Hmm.
you're looking for, you're craving it, you're wanting it as your fix whenever you're bored or you're anxious or you're sad or whatever it may be. This is going to be like, yeah, 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 I need that. And when you talked about the chats, I thought this is something that comes up all the time with women is like he's
Hmm.
talking to women online and I don't know who they are. And are they prostitutes? Are they just like girls he's having an affairs with? Can you give us a little bit of a lay of the land of like what is the pipeline like when a man starts looking at porn on the internet and where does that lead? What does it create in him? Because I feel like people my age, who was born in the
Hmm.
80s, it was like pornographic magazines, right?
Hmm.
Which is like tame by today's standards, I'm pretty sure, but also you can't get them anywhere. You got to get a magazine. And then
Yeah.
also VHSs, like people go buy VHS or take someone else's VHS. And I know that the landscape has really changed, but can you give people an understanding of this?
Yeah, so the pipeline, um, well, the funnel is broad, right? Porn's everywhere. Instagram, there's a lot of porn stars or whatever you want to call them, OnlyFans, content producers, whatever word you have for it, on Instagram, on any social media channel, basically, right? Maybe not LinkedIn or something like that,
Maybe.
but porn is everywhere, right? And so I think that's a way that people get into it. Also on dating apps, right there. I mean, there's dating apps that are set up for infidelity, but also just generally, right? That is a way that they basically can advertise, sex services, I guess, or sex industry or exploitation, whatever word you use, anywhere and everywhere, right? Like I think someone famously said that like porn built the internet, right? And so much of the content online is pornographic in some way, nature or form. But like when I talk to my clients, like it comes up in so many different ways. Like basic, like someone, also once famously said, if you can think of it, there is porn of that, right? Whatever thing you can think of, there's that plus porn has been created. So like whether it be like role playing or whether it be, chat rooms or whether it be sexting or Discord groups, like basically wherever people are interacting online, there's porn in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, it's not the sort of magazine or even when was growing up, just videos, right? It's interactive now. It's much more expansive. And in any way that you can engage with other types of content, right? Like through like things like this, podcasts, learning communities, or groups, right? You can find a fetish group for anything, right? Like I had a client, actually two clients, like which would shock me because it seemed like such a niche thing. But then I had another client who was involved in this adult baby diaper fetish. So it's wearing, diapers as an adult. It's not overtly sexual, but there is some sexual undertones regarded with it. So basically whatever your thing is, you can find it online. And algorithms and things will push that type of thing towards you, so then you just click it, right? That's what makes it so hard for men who, even if you want to recover, it's just everywhere, right? Triggers are everywhere online. And you have to, you have to work, you have to interact with other people. You can't just you can't just get a dumb phone. That's what people did, right? I just don't use my laptop or I have a dumb phone. Like you can't do that anymore. You can't opt out completely. So you have to find a way to figure out how to still use tools and technology, but avoid all the triggers which are everywhere.
Really, really hard thing, it sounds like, because it's your most strongest primal drive, which is sexual. And then
Hmm.
it's being dangled in front of you every single place you go. Every
Yeah.
single place you go, it's like, you could have this, you could have this, you could have this. So for the women who are watching and are like, caught my husband looking at porn, he's being weird about it, I don't know what's going on, he's, deny, deny, deny. What should she be thinking about it? What should she do? Like, how do you even address something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends on the level of behavior of what they're doing, right? It like if someone is looking at Instagram and just kind of scrolling through there, that's different than like being in a chat room, which is different than, going out and buying, sex. Um, so I think the most important thing in the beginning, I guess, is to figure out what is going on, right? Like, get him to tell you everything, essentially. And if he's secretive, then you basically can't until you figure out everything that's going on and deal with it, then you don't have there's no way to build trust. Like first, in order for trust to be rebuilt, first you have to know everything that he's done. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean everything, right? Because if he's hiding things, it will come up later, right? So you need to know everything. Then once you've known everything, then you can start working on forgiving him and he can start working on changing his behavior. And then that over time trust builds back through you forgiving him and him changing his behavior and you working on the relationship in normal ways, right? Loving each other. But while he's sort of in denial, right, that it's a problem or that it's an issue, and he's lying or hiding things, then you're basically, you can't move forward. You can't build trust off a shaky foundation, right? If a doctor wants to, remove an infection in your body, they have to dig every last bit of the dead and infected material out, and it's painful and hard. But if you don't do that, the wound will fester and never have a chance of healing.
So what I hear you saying is that this is very similar recovery to affair recovery. Like when somebody
What's
betrays you,
fair?
affair
Oh,
recovery,
yeah, yeah, infidelity.
cheating.
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
you need full disclosure. This person needs to admit that it was all their responsibility, what they chose to do, and that they are sorry and they're going to be honest with you and they have a plan of recovery. And if they don't, and if they're like, yeah, yeah, let's not talk about it, and it wasn't that big of a deal, you have a problem that isn't going to go away. That's just going to be there under the surface. And also, what I hear it is a big deal because a lot of women will come
Hmm.
online and I hear them say like, "Oh, my husband does this and that," and he's talking to these girls on Instagram, and I caught him and I got really mad, and he said it's not a big deal. Like I don't even like them, and like
Hmm.
whatever. It tries to tell her it's nothing, but she's really hurt and really upset, and she's wondering, is it nothing? Should I get over it? Should I
Hmm.
just like let him do his thing?
Yeah. Yeah, and if it's a big deal to you, then it's a big deal, obviously, right? But I think, if you're struggling with that as a woman, who maybe emotionally that you don't like it and it hurts you, but you're like, logically or objectively, is it a big deal? I mean, it comes back to your values, right? If you're a Christian, then obviously that's not okay. But if you're not a Christian, or if you have more, broad definition of what's acceptable and not acceptable in a relationship, then it can be harder, right? To find your line, right? Like if maybe maybe you've said like, oh, I support sex work, or
Mm,
people want to watch porn, that's fine. But then when it happens to you, you feel offended, destiny, maybe you feel a bit hypocritical, right?
mhm,
And so if I was to make a case for why porn is wrong or bad, from a secular, non-religious viewpoint, I would probably say that, ultimately, if you're in a committed monogamous relationship, or even, like a polyamorous committed relationship that's exclusive, um, you have committed to loving this person, and loving them means serving them, helping them, being committed and faithful to them, and giving of yourself to them, and that includes your sexuality, right? And intimacy is special because it's exclusive, right? If you go around and sleep around, or you're giving even just emotional, right? Emotional affairs, if you're giving those deep, special, secret things to other people, then it breaks the special, exclusivity and uniqueness that comes from that relationship. And so when a man is, drinking from other wells, so to speak, he's breaking that bond of trust and love. And so without that special, unique relationship, then it sort of distorts the whole thing, right? And for men especially, right, like women too, but not in as overt way, sex is super important for their commitment and their drive to be in and of the relationship, right? If they're getting those needs met elsewhere, then they're basically de facto checked out in other areas of the relationship too, right? Because it's all connected. You can't compartmentalize, oh, well, this is just what I do over here, right? Everything's connected.
mhm. I love that. And that's something similar I say to people because women will often ask, is this okay? Is this normal? Those types of questions. And I always say, you got to know your own standards. Because
Hmm.
one woman would say, I would never put up that with that in a relationship, to what another woman would say is not a big deal. Right. And you have
Hmm.
all these varying standards, and you have to know what your own standards are. Otherwise, you're left without any clarity to stand in your power. You're just like, well, I don't like it, but I don't know what to do. And it's like, well, what is your
Yeah.
standard? What will you tolerate and what will you not tolerate in a relationship? Um, the what I've found is that, like you said, that porn addiction is just like any other addiction, which means it includes the sneakiness and the lying. And
Yeah.
so whenever I see people say like, oh, and he lied about this, and then I caught him with that, I'm like, that's an addiction. This person is in
Yeah.
trying to keep it from you. They're trying to sneak around. You are dealing with somebody who's feeling a lot of shame about this, doesn't want anybody to know, and is just not being honest. And that's going to erode the trust now, because you can't trust him because he's actually lied to you. So I usually recommend those women go to a 12-step support group, like an Al-Anon or
Yeah.
something, because when you are the partner of an addicted person and you're staying, this for the people who are staying, it's a long
Hmm.
road. You've got to
Yeah.
have your own backbone that is so firm on who you are in the relationship, what your standards are, what you're going to do if your standards are not met. um and being with a group of people who understand this experience, like, yeah, my partner, goes and gets drunk and doesn't tell me, and then lies about where they went,
Yeah.
lies about the money spent, I don't know who they're talking to when they're out. It's like, you need to build up your sense of reality, because you get so wrapped up in this person and their drama, and
Yeah.
trying to win them over, trying to convince them, trying to get mad at them, and it'll just suck your energy dry. So if you think if they're lying to you, if they're being sneaky, get help, get support. You don't have to put up with it if this person is not remorseful and not at all trying to make a change. I've never seen someone who is addicted change without confrontation, like without someone being like, I'm going to leave you if you don't change this, because it's an
Yeah.
addiction for a reason. It's really, really potent. Um, so I wanted to ask a little bit about the way porn has changed, because one of the things that I've been kind of spooked about, and I don't look at it because
Hmm.
as a woman, porn actually disgusts me a lot, because
Hmm.
I know it's created for the male gaze. I know it's not female fantasy. Women read books. Women have all this
Hmm.
audio turn on for their erotic literature. And I saw porn when I was like 12 or 13 accidentally, and honestly horrified me. I was like
Mhm.
burned into my brain, horrified. And then I was like, now I know that that's tame because that was when I was
Mhm.
13. I've heard that
Yeah.
it's become very violent. Is that something that's quickly accessible by like teens and stuff? Like I have two boys. I know a lot of women are also not just thinking about their partners, but like, what about my kids? Um, what's the strategy there? What's happening to them?
hmm
A lot of
So,
questions.
so, like, how do you protect your kids
Mm-hmm.
from porn, and how, what is porn like now? Is that the
Yes.
question? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's hard, right? Because it's out there. A couple good resources that I use with my boys. I've got a well, almost 7-year-old and 2-year-old is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. It's kind of corny, but it basically explains to a kid in kid terms, what porn is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a toddler version, and then there's a school age, like elementary school version. And the toddler version is just very about like if you see, images of people without their clothes on, then just tell an adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because kids often feel shame because instinctively they feel shame, right? They're like, okay, this is like I'm feeling some pleasure, I'm feeling some activation in my body, but I know this is like probably something my parents wouldn't want me to look at. And so the shame instinct is to hide, right? So the book basically is communicating to them that these are bad pictures, you're not if you look at them, you're not doing anything bad, just tell an adult, right? Don't look at it, go tell an adult. And then the older one, for school age kids, goes a bit more into the psychology and what an addiction is and stuff like that. Um, and so I think educating them is the first step. And then having safeguards online is important, like software, like accountable to you or Covenant or some kind of parenting software that will like flag things because especially in the beginning, a lot of boys they just might stumble upon it, right? And so you want to prevent those accidental triggers because that's how I stumbled upon it as a 12-year-old just doing Google searches, right? And now it's even easier to stumble upon it, right? So you want to prevent that, you know, them from finding it randomly. And then in addition to that, you want to have ongoing conversation with them about it. Because they might be looking at it and hiding it in some way. Even if you have safeguards in place and you've had those conversations when they were little, they still might look at it or be engaging with it in some way. So having an ongoing conversation about it and in a really kind of non-judgmental way, like, hey, like have you been noticing any kids at school sharing nude images or things like that, or does this ever come up? And they might deny it, right? That's fine. Then you can just take the stance of like hypotheticals, right? Okay, if you're not saying that, that's great. If you are and you don't want to tell me, I understand, right? There's no judgment here. We know this is out there, but we want to talk about, what's acceptable and what's not, right? Talk about how, texting and sharing nudes, if you're in high school, that's technically child porn, right? That's illegal, right? Like obviously they're not going to convict teenagers unless it's a exploitation or severe bullying thing. But that's serious, right? Again, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
communicating to them. The challenge is communicating to them that it's serious, but that if they're wrapped up or involved in it, you don't blame them for that because it's everywhere and you don't judge them for that and that they can talk to you about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the really hard thing. And for, wives with their husbands too, communicating that I know this is an addiction. I know it's not about me per se. I know it's a you thing of seeking, comfort in porn, but it's also not okay. It's also not okay to keep doing that. And here's why.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. It's kind of scary. It feels just like overwhelming as a parent. Like,
hmm
I don't want this. You said something that I'm just curious to understand the boy point of view on this. Like, I hear that the age that boys are getting exposed to children, I guess, but especially
hmm
boys, usually younger than girls, getting exposed to their first porn is like between 7 and 9.
hmm
And I understand the curiosity because it's like, oh, what's this?
hmm
But you were talking about like there's some pleasure in it. Like, what is the deal with porn for boys before puberty? Like, is there more to it than just like novelty, curiosity? How does that, what happens in your head when you're a kid that age?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't looked at any studies on that, so I'm
Hmm.
not sure from a biological perspective, but I know that people who've been victims of abuse often experience pleasure and they feel shame about it, right? Especially if it was a pedophile or something like that. And so the reason for that is that when you stimulate certain bodily tissues, like it's pleasurable, right? Regardless of whether it's safe or you or even want it, right? And so I don't know this for sure, but one theory could be that it's the same with your brain, right? That if you show someone certain images, even if they're prepubescent and they don't have a sex drive per se, that might just activate the reward pathway in their brain because of our biological wiring, right? And
Right.
then so it's not about like proclivities or fetishes, it's just about like our nature, right? And that if you rub your genitals, it's gonna feel good, right? Even if
Yes.
it's from like a strange adult who's unsafe, right? And if you look at pornographic images, it might not feel good for every kid, right? Most kids might be disgusted by it or just naturally turn away from it. But
Mhm.
for some kids, because of the way that their brain is, they might just automatically, be like, "Ooh, I'm getting a dopamine something from this," and they don't really know why. They just know it feels good.
Yeah, no, that actually makes a lot of sense because it's true, right? Like before you hit puberty, your body still feels good, right? You
Hmm.
might not have the intellectual drive, but the physical stuff already feels good. And so if that gets activated too young or whatever, it's going to be something that you now are dealing
You,
with without the emotional maturity to deal with.
yeah, you don't understand why, but you know it feels good, and you know that you can find it, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd love to know a little bit about your work and how do you help these men? Like, first of all, I'd like to know what makes them finally ask for help, because that's what women love to know. And then also,
Hmm.
how do you help them?
Yeah, good question. So I'm kind of at the start of working on this field. It's something I've been passionate about for a while.
Hmm.
So I haven't done a ton of work actively with men on the issue, but I'm working on an online course right now,
Hmm.
and it is geared towards Christian men. But there's 7 areas, I guess, that I focus on, and these could be relevant to someone who isn't of the Christian faith too.
Hmm.
So this is a good test. I'll see if I can remember what they are. The first step is anonymity to accountability, right? So anonymity is a huge driver of this, is that if no one knows, then it's easy to continue in it, right? So you need to have an accountability partner. You need to meet with them weekly, at least in the beginning, and they need to ask you specific questions, and you need to have accountability software so that you can't be sneaky and that they will be notified when that happens. So that's step one. Step two is okay. Now my brain is trying to remember. Um, Step two is okay, it's complacent to committed, right? And so looking at porn can lead you to a place of complacency about it, where it's either through learned helplessness, where you're like, I've tried to quit this thing before and I can't, so you just feel like nothing works, or like your heart is hardened, right? You're numbed to how effed up it is, right? And so first off, you have to know why it's wrong and be committed to that, eradicating it fully from your life. Because with the learned helplessness or the sort of making excuses for it, then you'll never implement the changes, right? Recovery is hard. You might have to sacrifice things. For me, I don't watch TV alone. I don't watch shows with any nudity in them, right? And that's a sacrifice. Like I would like to watch Game of Thrones. I'd like to watch like a lot of shows that have nudity in them, but I just can't, right? Because it triggers my brain in a certain way. So so you have to be committed and you have to ruthlessly eradicate triggers from your life, which if you know your why, you can do it. But if you're just kind of point's not that bad, you'll never take the steps necessary. Um, and then step three is servant to son. So for a Christian, that means going from an attitude of seeing God as like this sort of taskmaster or moral, judge to your father who loves you, right? And for a non-Christian, this would mean, you know, um, seeing that you're searching for porn is searching for love, right? And especially, fa the father. I'm gonna get, it's gonna get me.
Oh,
Um, the father's love, right? Because for people who look at porn and for women who are in the porn industry and men, right? Men and women look at porn and men and women are in the sexual industry. Most of them have absent fathers or lack um lack a sense of being loved. And so I think, if you're a Christian, going to God for that love, and if you're not a Christian, seeking that love in healthy places, right? And not putting it all on your spouse, right? Getting love from friends and family and community and parents. Um, and then the fourth step is grinding to grace. So again, I'm trying to think of secular counterparts. So for a Christian, that's I thought I just need to white knuckle this. I need to bootstrap this, right? But that's not how it works. You can't do it on your own, right? AA says you have to relinquish the idea that you can be in control, right? So for someone who's not a Christian, recognizing that you can't do this on your own, right? You can't beat this thing on your own. You need help, and whether that's from the universe or God or whatever motivational thing you can't do it on your own. You literally can't, right? And accepting that, right? Accepting that you're weak and we are all broken in some way and need help. If you try to do it on your own, you're just going to keep failing and feel frustrated about it. Um, and then step five, I think the last three steps are to do with community, right? So building community, connecting with other people, especially for men, being mentored and mentoring others, right? You need like accountability is important, but mentorship is more about, okay, this is what I don't want to do, but who do I want to be? What do I want to become? Because the drive to look at porn or any addiction is a lack of love. But what's going to keep you on the path and continuing on your recovery journey is purpose, right? And for most men, purpose means, contributing to community. If you have a family, loving your wife and your kids. If you don't have a family, loving your parents and mentoring young men. There's so many young men who need mentors. They need a bigger brother to look out for them, right? And when you have a younger brother or a mentee, then you will want to have a higher standard for yourself, right? If it's just you, I mean, if you're married and your marriage is on the line, that's motivation. But if it's just you, you're like, it's easy to remain in that complacent mindset of who's porn really hurting. But when you think about, your kids or you think about a younger man, you're like, I don't want them ever looking at porn. So why would I continue to do that, right? And so I think for the long term, mentoring others, being a man of integrity and sharing your story, right? Breaking down the taboos around it, as a Christian, we would say your testimony, right? What God has done in your life. But, as a non-Christian, talking about how porn messed you up and how now that you're not doing it, all the benefits, because there are many benefits, right? But when you're in the beginning of your journey, it's hard to believe that you'll ever get to, long-term sobriety and you don't even know what those benefits are, right? But there's a lot of them and it's just so much better. It's just so much better living in freedom and with a clearer conscience and purpose and meaning. So so those are the kinds of things that I think men struggle with and the solutions to detaching from immediate gratification and to self-denial and deeper purpose through being a contributing member of your community.
I love that. I love that. And I just want to honor your courage to tell your story and to, like you said, like take away the stigma. We know this is just like such a common experience. I know it's got to
Hmm.
be extremely common given that it's everywhere. It so plugs into our primal tendencies. Like how can how can most men even avoid it is probably very hard. And some of them probably just they're like you said, they're wiring. Some of them are more easily hooked in than others. But also it just made me think of how lonely so many men are, right?
Hmm.
And how yeah, if you don't have friends, if you don't have mentors, if you don't have a community, if you don't have anybody you look up to who's inspiring you to greatness, it's like the allure of this is so much higher because you're not
Yeah.
feeling powerful and on purpose and like you have something to stand for. And so that just resonates with me and it moves me because like you said about the fatherlessness, it's either the father who wasn't there or the one who was checked out emotionally. And
Hmm.
men who are doing the work are an incredible blessing to this world. And I always just cheer you on and all the men who come along and say, yeah, you know what, I want to do better. Um, I wanted to ask one last question before we wrap up. What would you want to say to a man who's watching this and is, what does he need to hear who's struggling?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on whether he wants to quit and can't or whether he's complacent. But I think the general message that I would say if you're struggling with porn is that there's hope. Like you can get out of it. And it will be really painful to go through that journey, but it's really worth it. And going through recovery, you have to face yourself. You have to face, what you've done to yourself and what you've done to others, and that's really painful and hard. But it's just so worth it, right? It's so good to get out of it and really enter into your manhood and your purpose in life gives you so much more pleasure than porn ever could. And in a long-term, gratifying and deep way, not just a quick hit kind of way. So I think that's my message is that the message of hope that you can do it with help. You can't do it alone, but with community and with commitment, you can do it. And that getting to the other side is so much better than you can imagine. It's just so good. It's so worth it. So don't settle. Don't settle for less because there's just so much more to life.
Can you tell us how life is different and better? If you could describe some of the benefits that you're talking about, what are they?
I think a sense of joy and peace. I think when you're addicted to anything, you're really distracted and you're kind of living in a fog, right? You're just living from one moment to the next, and you don't even really know it. You don't even really know that you're always miserable, but you're always kind of like just a lack of peace and joy. So I think the two biggest benefits are peace and joy. Like a peace in your heart, knowing that you're acting in accordance with your values, even if you mess up and struggle like over many years, like you're acting in accordance with your values. So you get a sense of you can sleep at night, right? You know that you're doing what you believe to be right. And then the joy comes from relationship, right? Relationship with God, a relationship with others. When you love others, you experience love on a deeper level, right? Porn distorts love to mean pleasure, right? But love is when you love others, you get pleasure, but the true meaning of love is giving of yourself for the sake of others. It's anti-selfish, right? It's not about you. But when you give up your life for others, then you get both, right?
Hmm.
You get the meaning and the purpose, but you also get the pleasure, right?
Hmm.
But in a deeper way. So I think joy and peace are the two biggest benefits that I've seen.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, nothing can shake that, right? It doesn't come from the world. It doesn't come from your job or your money or, those are all just other branches of the addiction tree, right? Like
Hmm.
striving, grinding for some kind of like dopamine hit or pleasure, right? Hedonism, basically.
Hmm.
But it doesn't satisfy in the long term.
Mm. I love that. And it's that sense of inner grounding and peace and connection that, like you said, when we don't have it, we don't even know it. We're just kind of surviving. But
Yeah.
when you do that work, whatever that may look like, even with me and my growth journey and with my clients, it's like coming into yourself and looking at what you haven't looked at and doing the hard inner work, which most people avoid. The
Hmm.
benefits, oh my gosh, your life just is a whole nother, your clarity, your groundedness, your presence,
Yeah.
it's something else. And people notice, and it allows you to offer more of yourself to the world too. So if
Yeah.
people are like, okay, I wanna talk to this person, I want to see if they can help me, how can they reach you?
So my website is solidaritycoach.com. So if you want one-to-one coaching or counseling, you can check me out there. And my YouTube channel is Unchained for Christ. So if you want practical strategies and faith-based strategies for beating porn, I only have one video so far, but more to come. You can look at that.
Okay, that's awesome. And I just encourage anyone watching this who, you know, is like wanting their husband to do the work, you can send them this video because sometimes there's nothing more effective than hearing someone who's gone through it themselves. It's just there's nothing that
Yeah.
will get to you when you're in an addiction the way that it will with someone who said, I was where you are and there is hope for getting out. So, there is hope. There is hope. And thank you, David, for coming on and sharing your
Mhm.
story. And I look forward to doing this again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Shy.
You're welcome.
See you
Take
later.
care. Bye.